Welcome back. We are ready to proceed on to how to produce a statement. Number 7. So when we left off, we had a single event, and that single event had been turned into a single invoice, and the invoice is here. Now, we have to assume that a customer may be being charged for more than one event. Even if they only have one event, you always want to go and look to see if there are other events. When it's time to bill a customer, it's a really good time to update them on all that they may owe the company. And so you want to make sure that you have a comprehensive idea of how much they owe. You want to see if there are events that are open that need to be closed, and if they're closed, do they need to be invoiced? If the two can occur and you can close out all of the current invoices and send them over to a customer, that is always preferable than just simply providing them a single invoice. Now, you can provide them just a single invoice if that is the task at hand, but almost at any time you would still want to know what is the current state of the account to double check that the deposit hasn't been taken for that service, that perhaps more or less is owed in general, and you want to let them know, hey, this is not going to cover your entire account. There are many different reasons why you would need to produce a statement. The statement does not always necessarily get sent to the customer. Sometimes the statement is for your own purposes, or it's for the review that someone is requesting, or it's just a task that someone will ask you to do, such as, hey, please produce a statement for Mr. Bobbington. So in order to make a statement for Mr. Bobbington, which is what we're going to do now, we need many events. And in reality, we need many invoices. But in order to make an invoice, you usually have to start with an event. We're going to take a small shortcut on how to produce multiple events so that we can close them, so that we can have multiple invoices, so that we can place them onto our statement. So we will return back to the other screen, and you'll notice I'm now using two screens very actively. This is something that you'll also need to set up all the time. We recommend at least two screens, if not three screens. There will always be a much faster workflow when you can move from one screen quickly to another, and you'll start to see that happening here at this time. So in order to multiply this single event into several events, I'm going to be able to use a button that they've provided called duplicate events. So I'm going to just hit the button and duplicate the event. This will produce an exact event as before. It'll appear as they're both invoiced, but if you look closely here, the invoice number listed is 55839 and 55839. So both of them have just the one invoice. So you need to really reopen this event sort of immediately. Do not forget that you have two identical events that are both related back to the same invoice. As soon as you open it, that information disappears. And that's why that is so important. So make the copy, remove the connection back to that one invoice so you do not create confusion on that one invoice. That one invoice, of course, is over here, and that is the 55839. It remains here just the same. I'll hit refresh just to be 100% sure that the data is up to date. It is, and it is still there. So the original invoice is here. The original event is still closed. The copied event that reads duplicate is below it and open. And now I want to make a few more duplicates. I will prefer to make them from the one that is already open. Once I have two, I can also click two together and I can duplicate that. And this will provide me with four events. Four events, pretty good enough to make a statement. For the advent of speed, I could just close them all out now with the same pricing and the same date. I will do that. But if you wanted to make a more comprehensive statement, you could go in and edit them and then change the dates to whatever you needed to, change the pricing, etc., etc. But for the interest of speed and time for our tutorial, we're going to select all of them, and then we are going to close all of them. They all have initials. We'll all assume that they are ready to go. So we will close them. Once we close them, they will all turn green. Here they are all turned green. We can see that one of them has been invoiced, but four of them have not. When we return back to the invoices module, we want to, again, hit the refresh button so that we know exactly what the data looks like for Mr. Bobbington at this time, right before I receive the four invoices that are coming. The four invoices that are coming are going to be this one, this one, this one, and this one. And I'm going to then hit the close an invoice button. Once I do, it's going to transmit all of those events over onto the invoices side. All I need to do now is refresh, and now I have 4 more. At this stage of the game, you can't quite tell which one is which other than the invoice numbers. The invoice numbers, because I made them all exactly the same, are the only key difference. So we will sort of refer to these events now by the invoice numbers, as they're all pretty much the same. So now we have enough events in order to be able to make a statement for our customer and request payment. There are several statements that can be made. One statement is just simply running this filter that you're looking at now using a snip tool and coming in and allowing the customer to see perhaps their name at the top of the list so that it appears as a report, dragging down and including any relevant information that you'd like to see. That snip screen there will suffice as a report for many different purposes. You're able to isolate the total due. You are able to use empty space to do something as simple as just enumerating how many invoices the customer may have. If you're providing the report for another team member, this may be all that they want. You can also show if someone has credit available. You could highlight that in a conversation if it was present. You can also highlight the fact that a certain amount of payment, a partial payment, has already been made. All types of information can be easily conveyed in this manner. Let's say, for example, we wanted to make a slightly more complicated statement, or a slightly more professional statement, or a slightly more complicated statement. So in this filter, we have the ability to change all of the columns that we see visible. Some of these columns would not be necessary for the customer to see and may be redundant. For example, we have a property name and a property address, but the customer knows their property. So knowing the property name and address is probably not necessary. I'm going to go ahead and remove the property name and the property address. If a customer had more than one property, then perhaps I would retain those. But at this time, I don't need that. The customer also doesn't need to know the crew that performed the service. That information is somewhat private until it's asked for and requested, and the crew information can disappear. There is an email address associated with the customer, but we have to assume the customer probably knows that this statement is for them, and they know that this is their email address. So that may also be superfluous information. So we will get rid of the customer information. Now the date is important. Obviously the invoice number is important. The invoice tax, we do not charge tax, so that can disappear. The invoice total is important, but if no deposits have been made and no partial payments have been made, we don't need to see the invoice total and the total due. One of them is fine. And when it comes to clarity, the invoice total is probably a simpler to understand concept. So we will get rid of the total due. Now we have our invoice total, the amount paid. If we know the customer hasn't paid anything and they don't expect to have paid anything, then the amount paid column is also superfluous. Now, had they paid something, you would have wanted to leave it there. But for this example, we're going to get rid of it. So now we have credit available. Same question. Don't need that if the customer hasn't left credit and they don't expect to leave credit. They don't need to see it. The status and the sent status, both of them are not necessary. We're going to get rid of both of them. And now we have the actual decantation of the most accurate amount of information that they need to see in order to pay this bill. And we will see that right here in the middle, there's an option to place a title or description. We can go in and edit this field inside the invoices to add a slight description as to what this invoice is for. Most of the time that is not necessary. We will continue on with our very simple statement. So when you look at this statement, you look at it and it looks a little bit open. So we do some formatting by simply closing down and minimizing the screen. And this allows us to lose some of the blank space in the middle. So I may choose to shrink this screen to the tune that I still have the information that I need to see. I need to see the customer's name, and I'd like to see this in a compact and concise way. An easy way to do that is by minimizing the screen. I am then ready to take the same print screen approach that I had before. I need to relaunch that. That little sidebar automatic slide out will drive you insane. Trust me. We will choose to do a new snip This time we won't move toward the slide out slider, and we'll make sure that we snip just the information that we need. And now we have a very concise, very small statement showing the customer just the relevant information. How many invoices do they owe? We perhaps can fill that in for them here. 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. There's the total due. Here's the invoice dates. Other than that, there's nothing else that really a customer really needs to know. They are usually going to be quite aware of what their invoices are for, especially if it's a particular service that repeats in time. In any case, those are the simplest ways to create a statement. There are one other way that we will review now. Let's say, for example, we had to go and create a completely professional statement, and we wanted to turn this into a PDF. What we do at this time is we go to this button labeled Print. You click the Print button, and it will pull up the uh, fairly standard Windows prompt, and you will proceed to store this into the Google Drive. I will not go through that procedure because that is a step of learning in and of itself, but here we would proceed to save it inside of our Google Drive, inside a customer folder. I will walk through those steps briefly here on mine, but obviously on your machine it would be different. We go inside the customers folder, we go inside the additional customer folder, and then here I'd be looking for this particular customer. Now, of course, John Bobbington doesn't exist. I will make one. I will move into the white space. I will click new. I will click folder, and I will put on here last name first, Bobbington, always in capital letters, Bobbington, first name John, and click away. And we will come in here. We'll create a new submenu called invoices. No, I'm sorry. We will call it statements. And we will save this statement. We will actually give this statement the date of, we'll say the statement is for May of 2023. This is being saved as a PDF file, and we will hit save. The bottom of your screen, if you're using Chrome, you'll be able to open the statement now in PDF form, slightly more professional. However, this is not required if you're not giving someone an official statement. You will be instructed when an official statement is needed. Someone will request a PDF. If someone requests a PDF, this is what they're looking for. If they do not request a PDF, then all that they are looking for would be a simplified statement, and probably the faster the better. We can look through the columns and understand the information that we're looking for as individuals that work in the office. The customer may need some of that filtration in order to see it more clearly. That concludes the tutorial for how to make a statement. That is number 7, and we'll be back.